And today we have a great presentation called Let's Use the TI-Nspire CX II Graphing Calculator to Build Conceptual Understanding in Algebra 1. And our presenters today are Veronica Carlson and Kim Thomas. And after 35 years in the high school mathematics classroom, Veronica Carlson is currently supporting teachers as a T-Cube systemic coach. And Kim Thomas is a mathematics teacher at the Moon Valley High School in Phoenix, Arizona, where she teaches college algebra and AP BC calculus. So I think we have a bunch of experts here on the technology, and they're going to share some great information with you. And to give you a sense of what the agenda is going to look like today, we're going to explore the menu from a calculator page. We're going to look at a math-inspired activity, explore simple inequalities. We'll show you how to create sliders to explore graph transformations, and then collect data to explore and analyze linear relationships. So those are the goals for the day and the agenda. And now I will hand it over to Veronica and Kim to start the session.
All right, thank you, Dale. So here's my Nspire screen. And so we're here to explore some things in Algebra 1, and we're focusing in on the TI-Nspire. And I'm going to go ahead and start with a brand new document. So like I'm on my home screen right now, and I'm going to go ahead and press new. And do you want to save anything? No. This is a procedure that I start out my kids in my class. And we have a bunch of different things that we could do right here. I'm just going to put a calculator on my screen because I have a question for the group. So Veronica, if you can watch the chat for me.
Yep.
This is my teacher software, and if you don't have teacher software, TI is going to email you information about a syllabus offer along with all the other information from the conference when that's ready. But up here at the very top, it is really tiny. It says insert, and what I would like to do in my teacher software, this is not something that kids can do on their student software, is I can insert a question, and I'm going to insert a custom choice right here. And my question to the group is, what is the level of experience, experience, what is your level of experience with the TI-Nspire? And of course, I can't ever type. But I do come up with questions with my students like on the fly in class. So that's something that, it's an important thing here. And so I'm going to make this really easy on here. We're going to do beginner, beginner. I'm going to say novice, and I'm going to say, I don't want to say expert, but I'm going to say experienced.
Perfect.
So a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. So in the chat, I would like you to write down like a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3, because you're not really going to get this poll right here, but that is what we're doing. So what are we looking at with these?
Kim, we have a lot of experienced users, but there are novices and beginners with us this morning or this afternoon.
Okay. All right, so our goal is to make sure that everybody gets something from this. And as you have questions, please make sure that you do. But we really wanted to focus in on the calculator menu to start off with, because at the Algebra 1 level, it seems that that's where kids are using their Nspires. And so on the Nspire, you definitely have two choices. There's the scratch pad over here, and I really try not to get students into the scratch pad because it's not as functional as the whole Nspire. Like that, it's a scratch pad. So students will start here, and that's one thing that I try to get them out of the scratch pad so that we can have a record of the whole class. We can really see what's going on and go backwards and forwards. But when you hit that button, there's a calculator screen, there's a graph screen, and then I can hit escape to get out of it to go back into my document. I'm going to go ahead and add a page. So I'm going to hit Control Doc to add a page. And I do want to start with the calculator today. And everything on the TI-Nspire is menu driven, much like all of our softwares that we use. Sometimes our menus are up at the top of our computer screens. On our Nspire, it's right here in the menu. And when I'm on a calculator page, I have a calculator menu. Just like if I go to an Italian restaurant, I hope I have Italian food on the restaurant. And if I go to a Mexican food restaurant, I hope I have Mexican food on the restaurant, on the menu. So I'm hoping that I'm not seeing a cheeseburger in either location, but I could, depending on what kind of restaurant I'm in. But over here, this is the menu here, and I'm going to start at the bottom because I usually don't. So the very bottom option is to do functions and programs. So I can code on my TI-Nspire using Python if you have the CX2, or we can use TI Basic on the I'm going to say the more classic TI-Nspire. But that's what this is doing. So this is functions and programs, which is not what I'm going to mess with. So I'm going to go up the screen and I have finance. And what's really, really cool is I do have a finance solver built right into my TI-Nspire under the calculator menu. And that's really cool to explore with students because it's doing all of those things as an embedded app for the calculator. So we can deal with just solving for things. If we wanted to look at purchasing a car or a house or a long-term loan, there's different things in there. Days between dates actually might be fun just to kind of play with your students. How many days between the first day of school and the last day of school? And I'll calculate that. There's matrices and vectors. So not necessarily something I'm going to start out with my Algebra 1 class, but I most certainly could do matrices with my Algebra 1 with that scalar multiplication. So there's a lot to this. But I think it's important for sometimes students even just to hear those words and maybe play with it because someone will probably want to explore. We are going to go into the stats menu a little bit later on, but we do have statistics in the calculator menu and where they're doing calculations, results, list math, and so on and so forth. And all of these side arrows are telling me that I have more options underneath those options. So I'm just going to back out of that. Probability. This is one where definitely in my Algebra 1 class, building some of that number sense in like the statistics probability world, this could be fun because it's right there at your fingertips. You can go into probability and you could do some random generators there. So let me actually pick that again. Random numbers, random integers, random binomials, random normal, like there's other things in there. But that might be something that kind of explore with your students every once in a while. Like I know we pick popsicle sticks out to call in students, but maybe we want to do a random number of problems for homework and just using that calculator to generate some interest and see some of those things that it can do. There is a calculus menu. I do show my students this calculus menu and just like there's some words in there. Look, there's the word product and sum. Like the rest of the stuff they might not know, but calculus involves adding things up and looking at different rates and change. So that might be just introducing our students to what comes ahead. Statistics is also something that comes ahead. And then here's our algebra. Now, algebra has the numerical solve in there. It has the solving linear systems and the polynomial tools. And these are things that as teachers, we kind of have to think about when do we show these tools to our students? How do we use these tools? Because we should not be using them just to get answers. But that's where the numerical solve will live, the solving systems of linear equations lives, and then the polynomial tools where we can find real roots and complex roots, which is pretty cool that we can do those things. And number is where I'm going to land. So I'm just going to skip number right now, and we're going to go into actions. Because that's usually the first one the kids are like, what's actions? And I always like automatically say skip it. And I really shouldn't do that because in actions, that's kind of like our menu where we have things where we can define a function, we can recall a definition. Like these sound kind of pretty scary, especially if you're doing it first. But this clear history, like I want someone to remind me to go back and use clear history at some point in time. And I can also insert comments. So those two things are kind of interesting and things that students could be using. We also have a library, and we also, this is probably how we can lock and do some other things in there, but clear history and insert comments could be things we're going to use. But I want to land in number world. And so inside of number, we have the option to convert to decimal, approximate to fraction. We do have factoring. least common multiples, greatest common divisors, remainders. We have some fraction tools. Let's see what those look like. Proper fractions, get the numerator, get the denominator. Number tools, rounding, integer, fractional, signs, mod, floors, ceilings. And we also have complex number tools. So we have lots of different things in there where we can do stuff. And, you know, those complex number tools definitely are not at the Algebra 1 level, but sometimes students want to see those words that they're going to be using later on. I'm going to hit escape because I need to do something with numbers before I can actually do something with this. So I have my blank screen, and what I would like to do is I would like to really just kind of work with some fractions. So if you have your calculator, you can play along right here, and I want to work with the fraction 1/2. And so one thing that I haven't decided is if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but my students don't understand that 1/2 is 1 divided by 2. And they really will not write 1 divided by 2 like that on their calculators. I don't know why, but they really do focus on this notation right here, which is above the division symbol. So they tell me that they don't like fractions where I'm like, it's just division. And so they will always go control divide once they find that button and then do 1 divided by 2. And then my students will say 1/2, and I'm like, you're not overing anything. Like, you are not doing anything over. You're not done and over with this class. This is 1 divided by 2. And our first level freshmen sometimes will say, okay, what is that? Right? And so I'm going to just ask from the chat right now, does anybody know how to make that into a decimal? Any ideas?
Control divide.
Control enter.
Control
Okay.
enter. And then someone else says put in a decimal point.
Put a decimal point in there. So those are the ways that I use that. So another thing with this tool, in fact, I was talking to a teacher and he's like, you can't copy. And I'm like, yes, you can. So just as a reminder, I'm hitting the up arrow, and on my calculator, this is my up arrow. And I don't know that students necessarily always realize that it's an up arrow because they're using the touchpad so much, they're not necessarily clicking into it. But I can click on the up arrow. I can go and copy either one of these and bring it down. And you're right. If I hit control enter, right above control enter is my approximation symbol. And this is exactly 0.5. Another way we can do it is I see in the chat that we can do 1 point, and I would get 1.5. And then I also had a student that loved to multiply by 1 point. And it usually was 1 point times, and then they did all their calculations. And that's also another way to get that. So I pretty much tell people if you put a decimal in it, then that's where it is. Not super interesting, but I will tell you, working with Algebra 1 students, this is usually the point of frustration. How do I get a decimal? When do I get a decimal? And remembering that. So creating these situations where they do get decimals. So I challenged myself, and I said I was going to do this. So I'm going to go back into my menu, and I'm going to go back into actions. And I don't ever do this in my class, but this clear history right here, I wonder what happens if I do it. And it's a cleared screen. I actually don't like my students to do that, which is probably why I don't remember that it's there, but that's what clear history does. So it's always good to know what our tool does. What I want to do is I want to play with some more fractions. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 2, which is 1/2. And I want to add it up to something else. So I'm going to go up and copy 1 divided by 2. And I'm going to add 1/4 to it. Now at this point, I don't like just typing 1 divided by 4. I am going to do control divide. And I'm going to get my 1. I'm going to arrow down and do my 4. And I'm going to arrow out. And that skill is something students need. And we're going to get an answer. And the math teachers in the room say the answer is?
Well, maybe typing?
Maybe typing. 3/4. Yay. And I will make my students do that one because they're just waiting for the calculator to do it. And so sometimes I have to do this before I let them touch their calculator so I can do that. And we have 3/4. That's great. Okay. And so now I'm going to go back up and copy that whole expression. So I'm giving them that skill to do this so that we can do that with other things. When we're working with sequences later on in the year, I want to make sure they have the skill. And I am going to add to this, control divide, 1/8. So I have 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8. And my question is do I have enough to make a pattern? Like, does anybody know what I'm doing? And sometimes kids will like spit out a couple different ideas. They might have an idea. It's kind of early. And we do have some answers in the chat. And I am taking the 1/2 and I'm raising it to the x power there. So I have 1/2. I square that, I get 1/4. I multiply that by 1/2 again and I get 1/8. And the answer is 7/8. That's kind of cool. And so at this point, I'm going to ask everybody, what happens if I add in 1 divided by? So basically I'm taking 1/8 and I'm multiplying it by 1/2. So this is going to be 1/16, or I'm doing 1/2 to the 4th power here. And so this answer is going to be, any ideas? And we have some choices in the chat, and we will confirm that it's 15/16. So I have this pattern going on, and my students might not see this. So I'm definitely going to be writing this stuff out on my board so that we can see it a little bit better. On my calculator screen, I do have this option, this change it to computer view. And when I change it to computer view, I can see all of it, but it is considerably smaller. So we do have that piece right there where we can see that like that. Now, what could I do with this? I could look at those patterns. What I would like to do with this is I would like to go back in and I would like to look at the decimal approximations. So I have 1/2, and we did say if we hit Control Enter, we would get our 0.5. I can take my 3/4 and I get 0.75. I can take my 7/8 and I get 0.875. And on this one, I get 0.9375. So I do want my students to kind of practice and be fluent with the decimal and with the fraction. And it was exactly 0.9375. So that's one thing we can do with that. I'm going to switch this back to handheld view so that's big enough. So you can kind of see the difference right there. So that's one thing we can be doing. I'm going to add a page, and I'm going to go back to the calculator again and do my menu. And so with my number, I didn't convert or approximate to a fraction yet, but I do want to do that with this next skill. So I'm just going to kind of play with some numbers here. And so I do know the next one in line will be 31 divided by 32. I could put a decimal in it, and I have that 0.96875. And that decimal is exactly 0.96875. So that is equivalent to that. Now, what I can do with that, if I go into menu, I can go into number and I can approximate that back to a fraction. So this number is telling me right here that if I go 14 digits with my decimals here, that's how many numbers I'm considering with my fraction, and it will convert back and forth. And so sometimes students want to be able to convert towards a decimal or towards a fraction. So I can also take this, press my menu, do my number, and convert to a decimal. That's the other way we can do that, which is kind of fun. I have one more skill before we move on because there's many, many, many more things that we have to deal with. And that other skill that I really want to address is this word factoring, because factoring throughout the high school career, from my seniors to my freshmen, factoring is always a love-hate relationship. They either love it or they hate it. They're great at it, they're not great at it, and there's all kinds of other things with that. So inside of number, there is this word factor. And when we looked at that word factor, you would think, oh, I'm going to take x squared plus 4x plus 5 and factor it, or something like that. I'd be minus 5 and factor it. But what this is doing is this is doing a prime factorization. So if I were to ask you to factor 120, this is what I would get. 2 cubed times 3 times 5. And so this prime factorization tool allows us to really start looking at the prime factorization of numbers. So if I wanted to start smaller and go back to 8, that's 2 cubed. And actually starting making those connections between numbers, because the next thing that I need my students to do, especially as they're moving forward into our geometry classes and stuff, is simplifying the square root of 8. So if I were to take the square root of my 8 right here, it's going to give me a decimal. And here's what's crazy. We know that that's an irrational number. The calculator will do what you tell it to do. It's a computer. So if I want to approximate that to a fraction, the key word is I am approximating that. Just like pi is approximated at 22/7, I can take this irrational number and approximate it. That doesn't mean that I should. So that's the other piece where we kind of have to talk with students whether or not I should be doing that or not. And that's why they go through all of those skills of knowing something is rational or irrational. But what I can do with my prime factorization, I'm just going to bring that back down here, is that I could say, you know what, if I'm taking the square root, I know that this would break out to 2 square roots of 2. And I'm doing this really quick. It would be built up much of my class. And I could compare that answer to the square root of 8. But when I'm building it with my students, I actually don't just compare it. I actually do a truth table, or I do a truth statement with it. I will ask my students, is 2 root 2 equal? There's this equal button here. So I will have them use that and then type in the square root of 8. And if that's a true statement, then they know that they're doing it right. So I see a comment in the chat window saying having students change the float display is also very helpful. Yes. So I will show that real quick before we move on to the next thing, because really the next thing is much more cooler than numbers, I think. But when you go to the home screen, you go to the settings, you're talking about your document settings. And inside of that, the default is float 6. So that is one thing that you can change. You do have the option to always just float it, change it to other stuff. You can always fix it, meaning that you will always have 2 decimal places. You always have 3 decimal places or so. It really just is a personal preference. I tend to stick with float 6 and work with it from there because that's kind of what I'm used to. But you do have that option there. And so I'm going to do that one more time because it's not something that we do often. But you go into settings, and then this is a document setting, and then it stays. And that's where you have the option for your display digits. That's also where you can change it from real to complex when you get to like Algebra 2. All righty. I think it's time to deal with some functions a little bit. Well, maybe not in functions yet, but inequalities. What do you think,
Yeah,
Veronica?
it's time. Nice job. Right. All right. So I'm going to show you the TI website. And excuse me, education.ti.com. It's on every piece of equipment that you have, something that you may want to bookmark. I bookmark it and I put it in my math resources. And in activities, we're talking about things inspired today, and so math inspired. And so you can see that there's many different choices that you can select from. And in Algebra 1, there are many, many activities. And also, I'll tell you that in the middle grades math, there's lots of great things in there too. So Algebra 1 teachers don't think that there's nothing in there that's beneficial, because there's lots of good stuff. And I'm going to go to linear inequalities. All of these activities under Math Inspired have been vetted and test driven and updated. And the thing that I like to look at too are the download numbers, and you can see, how popular they are and that they're used a lot. And so simple inequalities, it's just a very simple TNS file. Those are the files that work with the TI-Nspire. And you can get any activity in a student activity in a doc form. So that means that you can edit it. You can also get it into PDF if you don't have Word. There's teacher notes if there's something that you're learning, or you're not clear on what something happens. And then the actual file. When you download it, it all comes together in a zip. Here you have just a little preview, talks about we have open dots and closed dots for inclusive and non-inclusive, a boundary point, and gives you kind of some other things that could relate to it. So I've already downloaded this activity, and so here are simple inequalities, and these are all editable for you as well, if that's something that you would like to do. And it says that we're going to drag point P below the number line, and that we can drag the point on the rectangle to change the symbol. So you can get this out to your students through, if you have a navigator system, or if not, you can have them come up to your teacher computer, and you can send it to the calculators that way, or through the charging bay. Okay, so here I have equal, and I have x is equal to -2, but I can take this, and this is a really good introduction activity so that students can learn how to click and hold this grabber hand. And as you can see, well, I'm using a mouse, so that's easier as with my teacher software, but students have to go control click, and you can see the little grabber hand in blue. And that's telling you you need to push control and then the center click, and that's going to close the hand. And you can actually see it close. You can also just hold this center click button for almost 2 seconds, and that'll also close grabber hand when students are working on their handheld, excuse me. So you can see here that x is less than -2. A nice open circle is there, and that's not always visible on graphing software. And that's something that's really important to me, to know what's the difference between less than and less than or equal. And then here we have equal, and then greater than or equal to. So it's going greater than to the larger. We can also start talking about domain. Is it including -2 or not? And I can then take P and I can move it wherever I want. So another activity just for kind of sense making and helping to understand what these inequality symbols are representing. And
Miss
then with point
Veronica,
3, yes,
can you move the P again? Because I don't know if it's like, I don't know if my students would notice that something changed when you did that other than the picture. Like, that's kind of cool that as P's changing, your numbers are changing.
yes,
And they're staying nice and pretty for this first initial conversation.
yes, no decimals are here. So for an introduction into inequalities, or a review, hopefully from middle grades, this is another way just to get students touching, practicing with their click, with their touchpad, and opening up a file, learning how to turn pages. Control right turns the page. You can also turn pages from the tabs. When it has blue, that means there's more. I can click the blue. And then don't forget, teachers, you have these green arrows up here when you're using your teacher software. And then there's a little situation that you could have students type in an inequality here as well. So again, this is just a nice little introduction And as Kim says, it's nice, kind of keeps everything nice and clean. And we go from -9 to 9. So that's really a nice, it's a nice visual. So just showing you that you do have lots of resources here on the TI website. And sometimes it's nice to have something in mind before you go shopping. All right. So any other comments, Kim, on simple inequalities or going to the TI website?
I don't see anything in the chat, but I can tell
Okay.
you that I've been dealing with interval notation in my upper level math classes,
Mm-hmm.
and I used this file as a review before I went there. And for a lot of the students, it really was needed. And it was nice that it was e- exactly what you said. You're going to grab it and move it, and you see the consequence of that, and they noticed patterns from it. So it looks really, really simple, but it was super, super powerful to use.
There's a lot of mileage there and a lot of practice, especially for beginners. All right. So the other thing that I want to kind of delve into is I'm going to change. These are some of the things Kim and we did the simple inequalities. And so I've added now a graphing page. So I'll show you how I can do that. I can have students do it fast, control, add a page and a graph. So a graphs page. And I'm just going to enter in a simple linear equation. And since many of you are beginners, I just want to kind of talk through some things here that I think are worth exploring. Remember that anything on the page, I can click and hold, and I can move it around the page so I can see where I want to put things. I can, you want to maximize too the size of your screen. Don't forget that I can also move these things around if I want to help improve my real estate, I'd say. When I go to my line, I can go, and as you see here, I'm at the end. I'm at both ends of my graph, and I see kind of a rotate tool, and I can click and hold. And this is the first thing I'd like students to kind of make an observation is what's happening and what's changing on my function. And if you guys want to play along, what's happening? It changes here. I'm in positive. I'm going all the way to negative.
And
Right,
we're
there's
seeing
a
some,
vocab word of
yeah.
coefficient. What is a coefficient? Changing the slope, the rate of change. I can make my line be almost vertical. And so look at that number and comparing to this number. So this is just a good exploration of slope. It's a good way you can introduce slope. I love how someone said the coefficient of x. Now, if I take my cursor and I go to the middle of my line, you can see that this looks different. This kind of looks like a crosshair. So at the end, it's circular. I call it the rotate. And here, I'm going to click and hold. Now it's changing. And it's just a up and down movement. Someone's saying B. What is B? This
And
one
I like the
obviously,
fact that this is, you have a continuum of numbers here. So we're not
yes,
just stuck with integers in this.
right.
Um,
I saw
and we're
someone say that
exploring.
the y-intercept is changing, and you can show that. Now, let's say that I really did want to make this a clean. I can double click on the label, and that's going to let me edit this so that I can make it a little bit more clean. I can come in here, and as Kim says, I can get that divide, and I can talk about what's equivalent. I can also go into menu, view, and I can add a lined grid. And so to check this, to see, this line grid is very helpful, especially when we're talking about rate of change. Here you can see very clearly that my y-intercept is at +3. Here's my rate of change for slope for change in y and change in x. So those are a couple of things there that I think are very helpful. What I did is I made a transformation with sliders so that students can also explore things. And I was going to build this with you for a quadratic. And so here I can also change. And notice that I have the slider on a notes page next to it here. And that sometimes there's a lot of things on the page and it gets real busy. And so this was a suggestion that Kim made that I wanted to share along with you. And so why do you think I have the blue F1 of X there on the page? Does anyone have any comments to that? Why do you think I left? Why is the blue lane there? Yeah, the parent function. I think that's something very helpful to have that there. And I'll show you how if you can change the color of the line and change the thickness of the line. Notice too in my slider that I'm having these actual values in here. So
I
I'm
love
going to
that we're
go.
adding the -4 because
Mm-hmm.
I know we're leading up to transformations, but when kids are just told, oh, it's just that number, and they don't understand that we're adding that -4, which is then turns into subtraction. This just kind of really reinforces all of those rules with integers that students might still be honing in on in their freshman year. All right, and Jenny's saying, hey, I want to know how to do the slider. Like you
All
said,
right,
you're going
Jenny,
to show me, so I think we're ready.
we are ready. Perfect segue. Perfect segue. So I'm just going to start with a new fresh document and I'm going to add a graph. And I'm going to first have my parent function in there. I like to have that. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it over to my corner. I have to be on the line and I'm going to right click it. So students can do this as well. So I am going to go to attributes. Attributes. I like to make the line just a little bit thicker. That's a thick line. Here's a medium. And then here I'm going to make it, there's kind of a dotted and there's dashed. I like dashed. And so that's my parent function. And so now I want to add another function. So I'm going to push tab. I could also do Control G. I can arrow up and you can see there's my first function. And here now I'm going to put in a quadratic and I'm going to type in x minus h quantity squared, and then I'll go plus k. All right, so I'm going to push enter, and it says, hey, looks like you have a couple of sliders there. Do you want me to create a slider for h and k? Yes, I do. And so depending here what my values are, I can take this and so this is all selected, and I can move it all around my screen wherever I want. And so I'm going to show you how I can move my slider. I can take my label. I'm going to move it down over here so it's kind of out of the way. So again, what's changing? So this, might be a good introduction. You can prepare this and send it to your students. Sometimes there's lots of new things happening all the time, and so it might not be something you'd want them to do. So, couple of things here to change the color. Kids love to change the color of their graph. I have to tell you, I'm favor the magenta. And this looks a little thin, so in attributes, I could make it a medium. And I can still move this around. So this sometimes, again, it's another click and drag practice. But after the first week of school and kids are using their Inspires, they're going to get the hang of it. And so let's talk about these sliders. So I can come in here and what I want to do is I want to right click and I'm going to go to settings. And in settings, I can tell what the step number, what the value is. And I'm going to make sure that the step is 1. I can also come here and I can change the style for horizontal or vertical. And I'm going to click minimize. I can change that float that someone mentioned, and I'm going to show the variable. And so this now is a little bit easier for clicking. So it's just a click, it's not a grab and drag. So what are those steps again? Let's go over here. So I'm going to right click. Remember that I can control menu for right clicking. I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to change the step size here to 1. And so I believe this one is my K. So this one might be nice to have as a vertical. And I'm going to say okay. And so now this one is moving up or down. To move it, have to select it and click and hold and move it. So I'm going to move this up a little bit. I'm going to click and hold this one to move. So kind of out of our way. And so students can explore what's happening. Now, the other thing that I like is that I can come over here and I can go to attributes again. I was on the line and I can come down here. I can change the thickness of the line, the type of line. This is the label. I can change the label if you want to have it listed in a y equals form instead of a function form. I like this one, but this I think is also powerful, where I can also have the value in, and this is telling me I have 2 different choices. So I think there's a lot of value and power that here's my H and K. And so you have to decide as the teacher, what do you like? So as these values change, similar to what we did before with the linear function, is what's changing, what value is changing, and what's happening to the function.
That is super cool.
It is super cool.
Will you do me a favor real quick? Because I
Yeah.
keep on seeing this thing in the menu and I've done this in my class and I've just like built something and I just let it sit out there. So if you right click on either your H or your K, whichever your favorite is.
Okay, right click in the slider. Okay.
So on our Nspires, our right click is our control menu, but you see where it says animate?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were going to plan on doing that, but
Yes.
like I just kind of sit there and like have that going before class even starts sometimes. And that's like, how'd you do that? Can we do that on our calculator? And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, the kids love doing things like that. And so it makes a little show. So the only way I can do it is to right click in K and stop animate. Now, there is a lot of things happening on this page. And so one thing you can do is even after the fact, after I built everything, I can come up here and I can divide the page into 2. So it kind of scrunches things in over here. Excuse me, but I can take care of that pretty quick. So I'm going to come over here and push menu and I'm going to add in a notes page. And here with menu, what I can do is I can insert a slider. Now, I've already created my slider, and so I'm going to go to this arrow and I'm going to select, well, I want H. And I'm going to keep everything else here. It did not change this, so I have to start from fresh. It's not copying it, and I'm going to minimize it. And now I posted it over here. So now on this one, I can delete it. So I'm going to do that again. This is a notes page, so active in my notes page. You can see that because the border up here is orange. I'm going to go home here so you can see the borders of the page, or the top, I guess, matches these colors. So notes page is kind of this golden orange. Sometimes too, when students get here, they're like, oh no, I have to start over. But I want to point out number 4 is current. So students can go back here and then they can come back to where they were. So it's not something that they lost forever. So let's do this again. I'm active on this page. You can see I'm active on this page. And so it's just clicking into the page to make it active. I'm going to go down so I can insert my other slider. So that was menu, insert, slider, and now I'm going to have K. I'm going to make sure that the step size is 1. And I think this one benefits from being vertical, and I'm going to minimize it. And now I have a little bit of extra space over here, so I can also size these, which I think is nice. I bring this down a little bit, and now I can delete this slider. So now I'm over here, and it kind of doesn't interfere. There's a lot of things happening on a page. So I think that's nice. Now, some of you may be saying, well, there's one more, well, really 2, but there's one more I'll say that I want to add to this. And so I can come over here and I can edit, and I can add in A. I have to say times and then enter. And it's like, hey, do you want to create slider A? Yes, I do. So right away, I'm going to, I see a question, Kim. I'm not seeing what it is right away.
How did you change the function to show the values instead of the parameters?
Okay.
And that was inside of the F, like when you selected that, wasn't
I'll
it?
show that. Yes, I'll show that in 1 second. I'm going to bring A over here, insert, slider, and now I have variable A, and I can move it to the other page. I did not minimize it. Let's go to settings. This one might benefit from a step size of half. I'll leave it horizontal, but I'll minimize it. And so now I can change. And I think that's important. So then now students can see that there's a negative function. Okay, so how did I change those values? I'll come up here and show again that I'm going to right click on the graph and go to attribute. And at the bottom, that's where it shows the parameters. So here it's A, H, and K. So I have to look over here. Maybe I'd want to move A to the top. But here it's showing the value. So I better move this over a little bit more so I can see that. So I can talk about how it's stretching and compressing.
Cool.
And I think there's a lot of power in attributes, go back to the bottom, and changing it so that the values are in the function. It shows the values. So I see someone asking, how did I add a notes page? So I'm going to add a new graph page, or excuse me, I'm going to just insert a problem. And what's nice with inserting a problem is that now I can start with new functions from 1 again. I divided my page into 2, press menu, and there's my notes page. So now I have a graph page and a notes page all together. And
Very
I
cool.
am way over time. And I'd like Kim to talk to you and share just an exciting data collection activity. So I'm going to stop, Kim, and
Okay.
give it back to you. I hope that was helpful.
All right. So I'm back to my calculator. And I did this experiment with my students, and inside of the documents, there's a little bit of an instruction page. There's also the TNS file, and it has the sample data. So we're nearing October, and so we're grabbing some candy out of a bowl. And so how I did it with my students is I said, find a partner. You're going to trace each other's dominant hands, because I wanted a hand trace. Because this was not my main goal of the day. I took 5 days to collect data. I did little chunks each day, and then we did it on a Friday. But if that was my main goal and it fit in the timing correctly, I would have just done this as a class period. And the question is, what is your hand span in centimeters? So students had to measure in centimeters to the nearest millimeter. And that was part of the instruction with measurement. And then I asked them to put this information into a chart. So in my classroom, I have a TI-Nspire, so it's really easy for me to grab data with a quick poll. But I could have passed around a clipboard and said, write these numbers into this chart. And so this is what they did. So we were trying to figure out, is there a relationship between the number of candies grabbed? We had to do some predictions, all of this other wonderful stuff. And this is the bag I used. I had a bag, I put some chocolate flavored candies in there, and I had students take them out and drop them in this blue container and count them. Now I've done this with Hershey Kisses. They get a little melty because the hands are warm. I think Starburst would be my favorite type of
I've
candy.
done
But
it with
something with that.
Starburst, and they're not
Yeah,
hanging off as much.
yes. But the important part is data collected from class. So here's 30 of my students. And so inside our list and spreadsheets, I have the hand span in centimeters, and I have all those values there, and I have my candies grabbed. And just
It's
in the
very important to enter in those titles in the very top. That's the title and not in the formula
yes,
line.
because those are our variables. So like I could add a page right now, and I could add in a calculator page, and I could have the list of candies grabbed. That's not candies grabbed here. Let's try that again. I can do the list of candies grabbed, and it will list them all out for me. So that implied multiplication in the previous thing doesn't exist because variables could be this whole big word. But what I want to do is I want to add in data and statistics. So my information is in a list, and I'm going to do some statistics with it. Actually, I'm going to deal with some data and random dots, just random dots. But what happens is I can click at the bottom right here, and I would like my students to realize that their hand span is that independent variable. So here's 30 of my students with their hand spans.
And I knew that if you guys were on unmuted, you would be going ooh and ah right now with all that movement.
So one thing I can do is I can change the page layout right here, and I am going to split this vertically. And I'm going to still press menu here. And I'm going to go back to data and statistics. And this time I just want to look at the candies grabbed. And so looking at those dot plots and comparing them really gives a sense of the data. And I
That's
start out with test data and do a lot of different things with that. And so we have those two, but I would like to put them together because we're looking at linear data. So I'm going to add a page. I'm going to do data statistics together again. And this time we're going to do our hand span. And you can press tab and it will move over to that vertical bar over there pretty easily. And then candies. And
nice.
there's our data. Does it make a perfect line? No. Did we make a perfect experiment? No. And that's the whole point, like to really just start collecting data and to be better users, consumers, and collectors of data. So I really do like all the mistakes that were in my experiment so that I could actually talk about those things.
But it's still showing a nice positive correlation, Kim. And I
Yeah,
think that's nice.
it's pretty.
And that's what's going to happen in your classes too.
Yeah. We can do all kinds of different things with it. I don't like showing students this first, but if you go into menu and analyze, you can do a linear regression and you can show that linear regression. And what I did with my students is that we did all of those pieces and then we talked about the meaning of the slope. I didn't talk about the meaning of the y-intercept because honestly, it's not a relevant part of everything. I'm not going to have a negative handspan. But the meaning of the slope is where I really did focus in on there, looking at that this is 1.616 candies per centimeter with my handspan, which was kind of interesting.
We could go to, this is a great use of the scratch pad where we could go and try to see if we could get approximate a fraction with that
It would
number.
be. Yes, that would be. So I guess I'll do that real quick. 1.616. I'm just going to do it that. So it's 1.616. Do menu, number, approximate to fraction. And so, yeah, that might be a little bit too far out there, but
right,
could be. I see we're out of time though. And I
we
know that there is a very special drawing that's going to happen. So
Yes.
Thank you so much for selecting the session, you guys, and I hope that you found it helpful. If you could quickly type in the chat, is there one thing that you think you're going to use this semester that you learned today? That would help Kim and I. And Dale, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Kim and Veronica. I am trying to share. Hang on a second. All right. So thank you guys. You showed some great skills. I hope everybody learned some stuff. I saw from the comments that there were a lot of people reacting to the sliders and it looked like some people were going to try it out. So I really appreciate that. And moving on to the next, every session that we do today is going to have a winner of a TI graphing calculator of their choice. And the winner for our session today is Kamisha Fullman.
yay!
Congratulations.
Kamisha, we'll be reaching out to you. We have your email address. We'll be reaching out to you to pick the calculator you like and get information on how to send it out to you. Thank you all again for attending today's session. I want to remind you that when I stop the session, you'll get a survey. Please take a minute or two to fill it out. Kim and Veronica would like to hear the feedback, and we would like to, let them know how you found the session and what else we can do to bring to you in future sessions. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon. There's one more session of the virtual T-Cubed International Conference that's going to start in about 15 minutes. We hope that you join us for another session. Take care and thank you again.
Bye-bye.